All right, Unit 3 of our Semester 1 study guide. First up, Chapter 5, Creation. Ex nihilo is this Latin phrase for from or out of nothing, and it's simply the teaching that God created the entire world from or out of nothing. And the Bible teaches this. The author of Hebrews says, by faith we believe that God created all things out of that which is not seen, right? There was nothing there out of nothing. Cosmology. This is the study of the universe and its origins. So a theological cosmology would be studying what does God's word teach us about the universe and its origins, and quite a bit. Number 3, was there order to God's creation? Yes, right? We see God giving it order in days 1 and 2, 1, 2, and 3 when he separates light from darkness and waters above from waters below and dry land out from the sea. In days 4, 5, and 6, we see it giving it further order when he populates the waters above and waters below with certain creatures and the dry land with other creatures. On day 4, he populated the heavens above with the stars and the planets and the lights to govern the day and govern the night, right? So all of that creates order. And one thing your book notes is that modern science assumes an orderly world. We can't study the world and predict things and understand things unless there's an order to it. And there is an order to it. And Christianity explains why there's order, whereas atheism has no explanation for why there is order in the world. There probably should be chaos if there is no God to order it. So really, Christianity is the is the thing that provides for modern science. Modern science thrived in a Christian Europe, right? Not in another worldview. All right, what is meant by the Hebrew word bara? Bara means to create, and the Bible does set this word aside just for God creating. Human beings, when they make stuff, it doesn't use the word bara. It only uses the word bara for God creating. So we think that's the biblical author's way of suggesting that God creates ex nihilo, out of nothing. The mechanism of creation. The painter analogy works for God ordering the world, but not for God creating the world, right? And this is important, right? So God didn't make the world out of pre-existing things like a painter makes a painting on a canvas out of pre-existing things like the canvas and the paint bucket and the paintbrush and so on. But when we come to God ordering creation, then you can use the analogy of painting, right? Once God has created all things, then out of the things he created, he gives it order like a masterful artist, right? That is biblical language. Also, there's some poetic element in the creation account, but that doesn't make it poetry. Genesis 1 through 3 is historical narrative, not poetry, but it contains elements of poetry like repetition and parallelism between days 1, 2, and 3, and 4, 5, and 6. All right, the day age theory is this idea that the 6 days of creation are really 6 ages, really undefined long periods of time, millions, maybe even billions of years in each age rather than day. The gap theory tries to say that before day 1, there was like a billion years. Like Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Pause. Billions of years. Genesis 1:2, then the earth was without shape and void, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the water of the deep. Both of these theories are attempts to fit a really large amount of time into the biblical time frame. And the reason they want to do that is because certain measurements, scientific observations, seem to show a lot of age in the earth or in the universe. So they go, well, there must be a lot of actual age in the earth or universe, and the Bible just doesn't directly mention it, so we got to find it. The day age theory explains it. The days of creation weren't really days, they were ages, or the gap theory explains it. But there's major problems with both of these theories. Those are in your book. Your book explains that. All right, number 8, what were reasons for believing that the creation account teaches a literal 6-day, 24-hour day creation? Reason number 1, there's an immediacy to the creation account. All right, God says it, and there it is. There's no hint that God said, let there be light, and light showed up over billions of years. God said, let there be light, and there it was immediately. All right. Also, there is the phrase an evening and morning each day, right? And there was an evening and morning the first day. There was an evening and morning the second day. And it does this for all 6 days. Evening and morning note onset of darkness, evening, and onset of light, morning, because God separated light from darkness on day one. Well, that makes sense. In a 24-hour day, there's an onset of light and an onset of darkness, right? But if it's an age, then what would evening and morning be, right? There's not an evening and a morning. There's many evenings and many mornings in an age, right? So evening and morning don't fit the idea that each day is really an age. Rather, they fit the idea that each day is really a day. Um, there's also numbers, right? So the first day, the second day, the third day. And when God is numbering things, he's numbering them because he's inviting us to go ahead and count. Like Jesus rose on the third day, right? The Israelites were to walk around Jericho 7 days, and on the seventh day they would blast the trumpet 7 times. Well, those numbers are there because they're literally countable. Well, God numbers the days of creation because they're literally countable days of creation. And then finally, the Sabbath day was this 7th day of rest. And not only did God rest on the 7th day, but God told Israel, just as I worked 6 days in creating and then rested on the 7th, so shall you work 6 days and rest on the 7th. And the Israelites didn't take that 7th day as figurative. They took it as quite literal. They rested every 7th day, every Sabbath day. When the sun went down on Friday, the Sabbath started. And when the sun went down again on Saturday, the Sabbath ended. They took it very literally. All right. To what extent are biblical genealogies useful in calculating the age of the world? They can give us a general idea that from today to Jesus was maybe 2,000 years. From Jesus to Abraham was maybe roughly 2,000 years. From Abraham back to Adam was maybe several thousand years, right? So we can get from us to Adam was maybe 6,000 minimum, maybe 10,000-ish maximum, if you consider the compressing of genealogies that sometimes happened in the biblical account. But they don't give us an exact number, right? Like the world is exactly this old. They also don't give us a figure in the millions or billions, right? So really there's room for thousands of years in the biblical genealogies, but not millions or billions. Atheistic evolution and theistic evolution. Atheistic evolution would be God brought about mankind from a single common, atheistic, sorry. There's no God involved, and mankind just accidentally evolved from a single common ancestor, however many billions of years ago. Theistic evolution. God used this process of the creaturely death and reproduction from the single common ancestor to us. God used that to bring humanity onto the scene many millions of years after the beginning. So your book teaches neither of these. Your book teaches that God created humans in the beginning on day 6. All right, micro and macro evolution. Micro is the idea that things do adapt to their environment. Individual creatures, whether plant or animal, they adapt to their environment to better survive. This is observable science. Macroevolution is the theory that all things don't come from distinct families, but one singular biological family. There's a single common ancestor from which all things, the trees outside, all the different creatures, and me, we're all in the same family tree. That's macroevolution. And your book rejects that. I reject that. I think no matter how far back you go in my family genealogy, you're only going to find humans. As far back as you want to go, all you're going to find is humans until you stop at Adam and Eve, the first humans. All right, chapter 6, humanity. What is meant by anthropology? The study of anthropos, or man, mankind. So we do a theological anthropology. What does the Bible teach us about humans? Why is humanity called the crown of creation? Because God gave Adam and Eve dominion over the other creatures and told them to fill the earth and subdue it. So dominion is like authority. Adam and Eve are like little king and little queen over the garden. What attributes can be considered within the wide sense of God's image? Things like intelligence, morality, immortality. These are all in the wide sense of God's image. Responsibility over other creatures. Did mankind lose or retain God's image after the fall? We lost God's narrow sense of his image, that we are no longer perfectly righteous. We are no longer holy, right? We've lost that, and we've lost immortality. Now we die because of sin. But we retain God's image in the wide sense. We're still made in the image of God with dominion and responsibility for our fellow creatures, with a degree of intelligence and morality and so on. Is the image of God what makes us human? No. We are human before and human after the fall. But the image of God is part of our humanity. It's part of it. What are reductionism and materialism, and an important part, by the way, what are reductionism and materialism and Gnosticism? Reductionism is a reducing of something to less than it actually is. In this case, a reducing of humanity to either just body or just soul. Materialism says we're just body, you are just matter in motion. And Gnosticism says your soul is the part of you that is really essential to who you are. Your body is disposable. Neither of those are true. You are a body-souled creature. You are a soul. You are a body. You are an ensouled body, and you are an embodied soul. God made you to be and have both. Death is the unnatural separation of body and soul. Resurrection day is when we are united body and soul again, as God designed us to be. On what day were Adam and Eve created? Day 6. Know the definition for primeval and post-lapsarian. Primeval is the perfect sinless state before Adam and Eve ate from the tree they were not supposed to eat of. Post-lapsarian is after they ate from that tree and they're now sinners. Post-lapse, post-fall. Know the differences between humanity's dominion and stewardship over creation. Dominion is humanity's rule or authority over creation. Stewardship is humanity's responsible care for creation. And it looks like I just restated some body and soul language there. All right, chapter 7, sin. What's the fall? Was it a good thing in the larger picture of God's plan? The fall was in Adam and Eve distrusted God and took the serpent's word instead and disobeyed and ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That was the fall. Was it a good thing in the larger picture of the plan? No. God did not plan the fall. The fall was bad in every way. It was a loss. It was a loss of our innocence. It was a loss of our immortality. We die now. It was a loss of God's image in the narrow sense. Number 2, God allowed or permitted the fall, but he did not cause or plan it. That's important. God receives no blame for sin, no blame for the fall. God is light, in him is no darkness at all. He is good. He did not author sin. What is your conscience? It's that part of you that is proud of you when you do good and ashamed of yourself when you do wrong. It accuses you when you break God's law. And Paul tells us in Romans 2 that even the Gentile who does not have God's law, and, it wasn't revealed to them at Mount Sinai, their conscience still accuses them when they do wrong. Like it's like God's law is written on our heart in a way. What's original sin? Original sin is not just Adam and Eve sinning at the tree, that original sinful act, but it's also this inherited or hereditary sinful condition that all descendants of Adam and Eve have. We are conceived as sinners, so we will sin when we exit the womb, right? Explain both what it means and what it does not mean that humans are sinful by nature. It means that since Adam and Eve, since original sin, we are born sinners. It does not mean that God made sinners. God made human beings good in every way, but we've become corrupt. So we're a sinner. Our sinful nature is by corruption. It is not by design. What is hamartia? It's missing the mark. It's lawlessness or lawless deeds. God's law is the mark, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. To miss that mark, to fall short of that, is hamartia. What is actual sin? Actual sin is the produce or yield of original sin. Because I have a sin condition, I will personally actually sin with wrong thoughts and desires, with wrong speech, with wrong behavior. Distinguish, Jesus calls it the fruit of the tree, right? My actual sin is the rotten fruit of the rotten tree, the sin condition I have. Jesus' righteousness is the good fruit of the good tree that he is. Distinguish between guilt and shame. Guilt is the objective state opposite of innocence. In God's heavenly courtroom, I stand before him as a lawbreaker, guilty. Shame is the personal feelings of embarrassment associated with that guilt. Sometimes the shame is working properly and you should be ashamed. Sometimes it's not. You have no reason to be ashamed, but you still feel it. But shame is the subjective, like, not only did I do a bad thing, but I'm bad now. And Jesus comes to cure us of both. Distinguish between depravity and concupiscence. Depravity is our inability to do the good that pleases God, to believe in him, to love him, to trust him, to love our neighbor. Concupiscence is our liking, our bent, our proclivity, our tendency towards evil. We have both as sinners. What are the results of inherited sin in our life? We're depraved. We're concupiscent. We die now. We suffer on the way to death. And we have an inability to do anything about it. We can't cure ourselves. We need rescue. What are the causes of sin? The world tempts us, the devil lies to us, and our own sinful nature desires sin. Those are the causes of sin. All right, God bless you guys in your preparations for finals week.